Welcome back to America's leading higher education podcast, the EdUp Experience, where we make education your business. Hosts Dr. Joe Salustio, Elizabeth Leiba, and producer Elvin Freitas bring you the brightest and most influential minds in higher education today. We explore innovations, ideas, and issues in higher education and beyond, and hopefully have a little fun along the way. Now let's get to it. If you say someone should do something about climate change, you're right. If you say I should do something about climate change, we should talk. We're Claremont Lincoln University, and we've created a dynamic new online Master in Public Administration program in partnership with the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy. This is an MPA designed to give future changemakers the tools needed to take on the issues in today's world. And because there's no time like the present to support our future leaders, the Lincoln Institute is giving $100,000 in fellowships. You could get a $10,000 fellowship towards your MPA. Apply now for the June cohort. www.claremontlincoln.edu. Welcome back, everybody. This is the EdUp Experience, where we make education your business, interviewing the brightest and most influential minds in higher education and beyond. We have a little fun along the way. That's a prerequisite here at the EdUp Experience. My name is Dr. Joe Salustio. Always with me, the amazing, the founder of the Black History and Culture Academy, Elizabeth Leiba. How are you today?
I'm doing phenomenal. Thank you so much for asking. How are you?
Well, you know, Liz, I'm still in my bedroom.
You haven't moved much.
Well, you know, I don't.
It's
true. I don't. I sleep here in the bedroom.
Right.
Of course.
True.
I work here in the bedroom. Yeah. I eat 2 meals a day here, breakfast and lunch. I do leave for dinner. So I spend a lot of time here. I will tell you, when I come to sleep in the bedroom, I don't want to be in the bedroom ever. I'm here so much, right? So I don't know about you, but you know, sometimes I'm gonna go crazy. You know,
it's definitely different, but I mean, I think we're all just trying to navigate all this stuff, right? It's a lot to kind of wrap your mind around.
A lot. Well, speaking of navigating, and I want to remind everybody of this, and we appreciate all of our listener support. You can rate. We really appreciate it if you would rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. You can check out our site at www.edupexperience for all of our episodes categorized by topic. We are interviewing just the most outstanding, amazing, thought-provoking, higher ed thought-leading guests lately, Liz. That's been a truly humbling experience.
Absolutely.
And we want to be able to continue to do this. But you know, if you can rate and review, it certainly does help us. And you know, we haven't strong-armed our guests yet into rating and reviewing us. And I'm thinking that might be an opportunity for us, Liz.
Yeah, put that on the list. We'll go ahead and roll that out.
You know, thank you for coming on the podcast. If you'd like your episode released, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. We'll have to find out how our guest feels about that. And this is my transition. He is co-founder of Clear Degree, and his name is Todd Eicher. Todd, how you doing today?
Doing fantastic. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, well, you know, Todd, until you rate and review us, technically you're not on. No.
There you go.
Poor Todd. Don't start. So we got to get him warmed up first before we start with all the shenanigans.
That's really a bad way to set the stage, isn't it? Well, Todd, thanks for being with us today. And sorry, you know, we always apologize for our guests for having to listen to all that back and forth that Liz and I do. By the way, this is the way our normal conversations sound when Liz and I talk. It is basically the exact same as this.
It's actually worse in the off the podcast.
And much more of you telling me what to do. Yeah. Like, Joe, you need to do this. Joe, you got to stop doing that. Like,
absolutely.
You know, and then it just digresses from there. And then, you know, 20 minutes go by. We have no idea what we've said. What I do know is that, Todd, you have a lot going on at Clear Degree, the education concierge. And so for everyone that is familiar with Clear Degree and know exactly what you do, that's fantastic. But let's just assume for a moment that we have somebody that does not know what Clear Degree is. Why don't you explain it to us?
Yeah, absolutely. The best way to sum it up is that we provide personalized, so it's individualized, it's personalized, unbiased guidance for working professionals that want to go back to school. And with the guidance that we provide and the steps that we go through, we help them find the perfect online degree at the right price. That's the best way to sum up what it is that we do.
So you work with the employer to then work with the employee. Is that right? You contract with the employer to provide the concierge service to the employee?
Yes, absolutely. So employers bring us in, we contract with the employers, as you said, and they bring us in as an innovative education benefit that they can offer to their employees. So we come in, we sit right next to any tuition reimbursement programs that they have in place. If they don't have tuition reimbursement programs in place, we provide a less costly and less administratively burdensome benefit that they can offer that's really focused on education for their employees.
Okay, so the value proposition for the employer is, let me provide another benefit, a really awesome benefit, which is any kind of concierge service where you're getting handheld through a process as an employee who's busy, right? That's the idea. The employee is super busy. They're at their company working. If they're thinking about going back for higher education at any level, there is I don't want to say it's an intense process, but it's intensive, a process of exploring and comparing and shopping and thinking, and your service really alleviates that work and pain, so to speak, of going through all of that, which can be hard and hard to understand too, especially when you get to cost structures, which I'm sure you have a lot to say about that. So you guys handhold the employee through that process so they can focus on their work.
Absolutely, absolutely. If you think about, the typical employee, it really is, it's extremely intimidating and complex and confusing to find the right degree program when you start to consider today. I mean, it was much different 10 years ago, but today there are 30,000 online degree programs out there. And so if you're the typical employee and you want to go back to school, how do you even start down that road? Where do you go? How do you start to sort through all those options that are available? And so that's where we step in to really do that research on their behalf. And as you said, hold their hands through the process. And it's a very one-to-one process where we work with them on an individual basis.
Liz, this would probably resonate with your daughter, right? She's you think about, what going back to school would look like or how to do it, even if you're thinking about going to college for the first time. But definitely if you're a professional or you're somebody who's going to get a job and work, having a concierge service there to walk you through the process could alleviate so much. And it's pretty amazing.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think for a lot of people, especially for myself being an online faculty member for over a decade, I think a lot of people are, and I actually also for both of us, Joe, working in the admission space as well, a lot of people are intimidated when it comes to comparing degree programs. So one of the questions that first sprang to mind for Todd is, when you're working with the companies or also working with the individuals, like what are some of the biggest concerns or what are some of the misconceptions that people have about online learning? Myself and Joe, having worked in the space for such a long time, sometimes people really don't understand about online learning and what it really involves. So what are some of the things and some of the, I guess, pitfalls or some of the things that you're having to guide potential students through?
Yeah, a lot of times what happens is even before they get to the school, what happens is these folks they fall into this whole marketing. I almost want to call it a sand trap, right? Where they don't know how to find, they don't know how to find a program, they don't know where to look for it. So they start a lot of us do. They start online, Google, searching, and they end up in these marketing funnels where they maybe sign up on a site or something like that, and they become inundated with phone calls and emails, and it can be overwhelming for them. And so I think the first misconception they have is that there's no other way to find a program other than to go through that experience, which is not very helpful, not very positive. And that's where we can step in and help them through that without being inundated by the phone calls and not being inundated by the overwhelming amount of emails that come their direction. I think the second big misconception we run into is it's really a lack of knowledge of the options that are available out there. They may think that they, can go get an MBA program, but it's only an MBA program, and haven't thought about, different concentrations, different specializations, different emphasis. And that's part of what, particularly in our first phone call where we're getting to know the individual, that's one of the things we focus in on is, what is it you really want to study? What are the areas you're interested in? And once we start to learn what they really are interested in and where they want to go with their careers, then we can start to understand, okay, there's a lot of different degree types out there that are available to you in today's market environment.
How much of is it decoding cost, Todd? I mean, we've had really we've had a group of guests on, and I think about Mark Salisbury, Liz, your conversation with him from Tuition Fit and others, where there's so much complexity around college cost, this fee or that fee or this thing or that thing, and that so much of how the student interprets the information is individual, right? Where they really look at this and they say, well, I think I can afford that. I don't know what this is really, but it looks like I might be able to do this. How much of what you're doing for the student is financial, financial, I don't know, like translation?
Yeah, the biggest surprise for our clients around costs, around price, their biggest surprise is the variability in price. And so, part of what we do in our process is we start to lay out programs side by side over a whole host of different data points. But obviously, one very important data point is the cost, is the tuition. And we often get comments as we're going over, particularly the first time we cover the information with them. They are shocked by the variability in the price. They are shocked that programs in a very particular degree area can range from $12,000 to $70,000. And I think that's part of what we help them see is that there is choice out there, and there is variability in that cost factor. They don't have to go to the most expensive school. They can get a really high quality education and spend less amount of money on it.
This distinction is really important, by the way, Liz, and I think this is what you're talking about. Clear degree research as online degrees, right? And correct. Because the working professional who's thinking about going back to get their education isn't going to have time to go to an on-ground program. So why waste the time with the research? Essentially is, I mean, I know you don't say it like that, but I'm saying it like that. It's probably not going to work if you have an 8 to 5 or a 9 to 6, and you're
consuming. It's very time consuming. Yeah. What about the differentiators though? Like, what are some of the things that you talked about? The idea of getting a quality education. You don't necessarily have to go to an Ivy League school or even a state school. You can get the same education in a variety of online programs that offer a comparable, or for myself, teaching in the online space, sometimes even superior when I've compared some of the different programs I've taught across maybe a dozen schools over the course of my career. What are some of the things that students are looking at for those that are in online learning in administrative capacity or work in admissions? What are some of the things that students are like, oh, wow, that school has that, that's really great, or some of the things that really catch their eye as far as those differentiators that you were talking about?
Yeah, and it's really individualized to the person, because everybody has different thoughts on what they're looking for, which is why it's important to work with them on an individual basis. But things that come up a lot are things like entrance exams. Is an entrance exam required? I don't really want to take one. Or if it's required, are there some waivers around it? Some ways to waive that entrance exam requirement. Prerequisites. So what are the prereqs for the program, and do they meet the prereqs already? And if they don't, is there a efficient way to pick up the prereq that's going to be required for the particular program? Sometimes honestly, it's about the actual curriculum and the courses themselves. So one of the things that we'll do is we'll lay out side by side, hey, at this school, here are the actual courses you're going to be taking, and here's what they are at these other schools. And sometimes that's a big differential, because the degree name can be one thing, but when you dig into the coursework, that's where the student starts to understand, okay, in this program, I'm learning things I really want to learn, and I'm gaining knowledge that's going to help me in my career. In this other program, hey, maybe there's just some courses that don't really speak to me and don't help me out in the places that I want to go. So those are differentiation factors. Sometimes it can be things like, even I haven't been to school in a long time, and I know I'm going to need some support as I'm going through that experience and that school experience. So they'll want to know about, what's the student support structure that's available to me? Is there tutoring available? What kind of advisors do I have? What kind of access do I have to the faculty if I'm going to need some extra help as I'm going through the program? Another big one that comes into play, this kind of speaks more to the cost side of it, but is the concept around tuition deferral and a concept around when is that tuition actually due? Is it due at the beginning of the term or is it due at the end of the term? And that's important for these adult students, working professionals that have access to tuition reimbursement. When they have access to tuition reimbursement for their company, they'd rather have that tuition deferred to the end of the term to match it up or tie it to the timing of when they're going to receive that reimbursement, rather than having to front the money and then get reimbursed at the end of that particular term. So a lot of those types of factors come into play. Another factor that comes into play, and this speaks a little bit to cost as well, is textbooks. Are they included in the tuition?
Watch out. Liz is going to get in on this one. This is a hot button issue for her.
It is. It is a huge hot button issue for me.
Watch out, Todd.
But it matters, right?
Yeah.
It does matter. You're right, Todd. It does.
No, you're right.
And that's one of the questions we always ask when we're looking at a program is, are the textbooks additional or are they included in the tuition? And we usually tell our clients, look, it's not neither good nor bad necessarily, but we want you to know. We want you to know before you ever get to the school whether you're going to have that additional cost or not.
If you think it's time for a change in your community, but more importantly, you want to be the change, an online Master in Public Administration degree from Claremont Lincoln University could be the start. The CLU MPA program has an advisory council of frontline leaders, mayors, school board members, city council members, a state senator, and even a state treasurer, all looking for the next generation of changemakers. In other words, who's next? The real world is calling. A CLU MPA is part of the answer. Find out more at claremontlincoln.edu/MPA. You know, no, Liz, go. It's fine. You like to interrupt me, and I feel privileged every time you do.
No. I guess the question that springs to mind before you jump in, Joe, was, are you able to, because I always think in terms of higher education, and Joe and I have many conversations about this, in terms of higher education being responsive to the consumer model, the idea, and Joe will jump on his soapbox, so don't worry about that. The idea of looking at student needs and being responsive and being more agile and looking at, okay, what does the student want? The student is a consumer. The student does have the ability to drive the direction because they ultimately are the ones that are making this choice and spending their money. So they're going to be a lot more aware and cognizant of exactly what their needs are, rather than us that work in the space and we should just be responding to them. So are you able to, when we think about those two things that you talked about, the tuition reimbursement policies or the textbook idea that a lot of schools now are going to textbook optional or open educational resources and things like that, are you able to relay some of that feedback to colleges and universities so they can be a little bit more aware of what the student feedback is in terms of or are colleges kind of pretty rigid in, well, this is what it is, either, they either like it or not kind of thing as far as.
So that's a really great question. And to date, we haven't had a lot of, we haven't had a lot of schools asking us for feedback. We certainly have it. And when, the rare occasions we're asked, we're happy to share it. Over time, we would like to spur more of that conversation because if we can spur that conversation and we can talk about, here's what's important to the students we're talking to, it only helps the overall end product get better. But to date, we have not had a lot of demand for our thoughts on that.
Joe, you got to jump in on this because I feel like, okay, if I was Amazon, why does Amazon have ratings, right? It's like you want to know what products are good, what products need to be improved. Me as a consumer, if I see ratings or, or if I'm Amazon, I'm able to see, like Amazon has those bestsellers or Amazon, what is that, Joe? I know you're ordering stuff from Amazon all the time. Like they have the ones that they promote, like this is Amazon approved.
Sponsored
products. Yeah,
products.
like the sponsored products, because I feel as though as the school, as the institution, a college or university, if you're hearing that feedback, then that allows you to be able to kind of corral your resources a little bit better. Like, okay, student support is definitely something that a lot of our potential students have a big concern about. Let's pivot in that direction. Or a lot of our potential students really are concerned that we don't have optional textbooks or OER materials available. Let's kind of look at that internally. You would think, right, Joe?
Yeah, and I'm going to have to. You reminded me to talk to our buddy Ken Eisner that we interviewed from Amazon Web Services, because I've been talking about my microphone struggles, and all of a sudden I had an advertisement for like this noise reducing egg crate that
That
goes around
happens to me too.
and I was
I'll be
like,
talking about something and then it just pops into
"Are you?"
my feed and stuff like that.
It's
Yeah.
like Ken bugged my Zoom. I gotta get with Ken. I'm gonna talk to him. Anyway,
Well, it happens to me too. Like it pops up on my Facebook. So maybe we need to talk to Mark Zuckerberg also.
yeah,
Because
Zuckerberg. Come on,
yeah,
man.
I'm totally having a conversation with my husband, and all of a sudden the thing that I'm talking about pops into my Facebook feed.
I'm telling you. Well,
So,
and to your
anyway.
point, and to your point, I agree. And what I would think about if I was the university, I would want to know,
Yes.
Todd, how many of the students are picking their institution based on whether they have an entrance exam or not? How many students are picking their institution based on just pure cost? What percentage of the students really sit down and look at the curriculum, which I would think is way less than people probably think it is. I think the curriculum in a lot of times is fairly similar, and it's like the shopping list. What's the shopping list? What's the check boxes that students are going through? Without that data, how can you really provide a program that's going to be viable? They're going to go somewhere else, right? I mean, it seems to me that you'd have some very, very, very important data to share.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, the number one criteria is quality of the program, and they want to make sure they're going into a high quality program. And obviously in our role, every school we recommend meets, the right accreditation
standards, right?
It has the quality. So we take that off the table pretty quick, because we're like, look, everything we show you is going to have the high quality. So from there, cost does become a huge driver. Once they know the quality is there, then cost is a huge driver. And so, yeah, I mean, those things, and then admissions tests, depending on the program, because that's just one more step, right? They'd have to go through. That's one more expense to actually sign up and take the test and do any prep courses. So that becomes a factor. So yeah, there is kind of a hierarchy of what people go through. But quality costs tend to be quite a bit higher than a lot of other factors.
It's interesting. You're reminding me of when I went for my graduate degree, my master's. I literally remember the first search I did was a leadership master's degree, no GMAT.
Right.
Because I was like, I've got all these years of professional experience. I'm managing like 200 people. If you need to test me to get into university, forget it. I'll go somewhere that values me more and doesn't put me through these hoops, right? And that literally became a sticking point for me on how I chose my university. As crazy as that sounds, I think that does happen more often, and that's why I ask you about demystifying parts of the decision-making process. And I want to go to one in particular too, which is tuition discounting, right? Tuition discounting exists. There's a list price in many universities, and then there's the price that you actually pay once you negotiate, essentially, whether it's a scholarship or they have a price reduction for this or a price reduction for that. Do you do the negotiating? Do you help on behalf of the student as the concierge, literally walk them through that and say, hey, look, this program is this much and this one over here is this much, and you know what, we're going to go to this one and see if we can reduce that price for you?
Yeah, what we do is twofold. So one, we help the student understand transfer credits. And so we help them understand, so part of what we learn about their background is, what prior education do you have? And so we work with them on understanding transfer credits. We'll look at their transcript. We can't obviously guarantee anything because we're not the school, but we'll look at their transcripts and go, hey, in our view of your transcripts, here's the ballpark you should be in terms of transfer credits, because that's an enormous way to reduce the overall cost. The other aspect that we run into a lot in terms of negotiating down the price is actually partnerships that the employers have in place with the schools. And so there'll oftentimes be partnerships where, if you're employed by XYZ company, there's already a negotiated discount. And so we make our clients aware of that. We do at times actually work with our clients, actually work with the companies to go out to schools and help them sign up the partnerships and negotiate the discounts at that level as well. So that's where we're really trying to help the students with their with that aspect of the overall cost. The third place we help with that is there are times where you can go into a program, but you can earn some underlying credits at a local community college at a lower price point, or you can access things like CLEP. And so we'll expose our clients to those opportunities as well that will ultimately lower their overall cost.
Yeah, that's really interesting stuff. Go ahead, Liz. I see you popping in.
Yeah, I was just going to say, do you find just from I do a lot of work in the equity space and thinking about ways to create more equitable work environments for people that work in the corporate environment. So do you find that a lot more employers, especially given the climate of the country over the past year or so, are looking at ways to create more inclusive environments, ways to encourage employees to take advantage of tuition reimbursement? Are you getting a lot more requests from employers? Are you getting a lot more requests for students? Like, how does that piece play out? Because we always think about, in terms of our conversations, myself and Joe, how education plays into a role overall of us having a more equitable society. We know that higher education is a big component of that. So I wonder if companies are really taking advantage, because this is an awesome service and something that really could benefit a lot of people, especially those we know in higher ed, that we have a lot of working professionals that have started a college degree and have credits on the table, but they have not been able to make it to graduation. So I feel as though this would be such an amazing service to have across the board for those just out here in the workforce that just don't have the proper guidance. And now that they're older, it's almost like maybe it's a little sense of embarrassment, or it's not like an 18-year-old. It's a little bit more like, hey, I can just go to a guidance counselor. If you're mid 20s or 30s, or even in your 40s, I went back to grad school and I was well into my career. Are employers recognizing just how important of a service this is, or how has the response been?
Yeah, what we've been finding more recently, and this has been fascinating, but it's been fantastic. What we're finding more recently is companies are more and more open to us coming in and doing a webinar for their employees. And typically, the way we structure the webinar is we talk about, first we talk about what the company themselves is doing and how they're supporting the employees in furthering their education, by the tuition reimbursement programs they have in place, by frankly bringing in Clear Degree to be that guide and to help the employee through that. And then we talk about just higher education in general. And we talk about why it's difficult and why it's hard to ultimately find the right program. And then, of course, we talk about what we do and how we can actually be side by side with them and help them through the process. But to your question, we're seeing more willingness to let us come in and do those webinars. I think in the past, some of that tuition reimbursement, even though the benefits existed, or maybe even Clear Degree was in there, it wasn't necessarily really promoted out to the employees. But by doing the webinars, we're able to really put that in front of the employees. And and to your point about, hey, somebody might be a little embarrassed, we're able to open that door up and say, look, this is available to you, and these are great ways to go further your education, and do it in a way where you don't have to be confused or overwhelmed by the overall process. So yes, more openness to the webinars, which gets the word out and helps those employees understand what really is possible for them. And so that's been a real recent kind of development, but it's been a gratifying one to see.
Todd, let me ask you just a business financial question. And you're, and this is an assumption, but you're, as an employee benefit, probably victim to, cost cutting. And as we've gone through the pandemic, we've seen organizations, I should say, looking at cost cutting measures, cutting employee benefits, cutting employees, frankly, cutting tuition reimbursement programs. And then, there has been I would say a little bit of a resurgence back towards, yes, we're going to invest in our employees. Everybody's at home. We need to provide employee benefits. We need to do this. And so it's fluctuated a little bit during the pandemic. How has Clear Degree fared during the ups and downs that we've experienced lately.
Well, Joe, you actually described the experience we've been through for the last 12 months really well. So at the front end of the pandemic, and probably for the first 6 months, we didn't get cut anywhere, but at the same time, having new companies want to listen to us and having new companies want to bring us in, that really slowed down, and it made sense, right? Because a lot of these companies, they were wondering whether they're going to survive, and if they're in survival mode and wondering whether they're going to be here tomorrow, they're not probably all that worried about bringing in a new employee benefit. But now, say over the last really this calendar year, and I know we're only 2 months into the calendar year, but we've seen a real shift where companies are like, okay, we know where we're at, we know where we're going, we can see light at the end of the tunnel. We're ready to re-engage and start thinking about bringing in these types of benefits. So I think there's been a real shift in the mindset.
Well, and it's good to know that you guys are coming out the other side, because I think what you do is so important for any student at any level. I mean, you take Liz or I've been higher ed for 20 years each. Maybe longer for you, Liz, maybe 35 years. I'm sorry if I got that wrong.
Oh, no, but probably 40, 45 years
40,
or so.
45. Yeah.
Definitely. I'm definitely up there.
I mean, Liz, you've just been around forever.
Forever.
Even for somebody that understands higher ed, it's hard. It's hard to gather information to compare. It's hard to understand the steps, and having a service to help wade through that, I think, is so important as an employee benefit, especially as we are now in a work from home environment where I think time is at a premium for moms in particular. And I don't want to speak for women out there and women like yourself, Liz, but I mean, there is a lot of information around moms just being completely stretched, right? Women that were in the workforce just being absolutely, I don't know what, mental health stretched to the absolute max. And, if you can help them understand how to get to school and do it in a way that reduces that burden, Todd, more credit to you. And I appreciate what you're doing out there.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that. I mean, one way to think about it is, as individuals, I mean, outside of the profession that we're all in, as individuals, you rarely buy education. You just don't, right? You buy it once or twice during your lifetime. So what that means is most people don't have the expertise, let alone the time to actually do that research. You just don't know, because you don't do it very often. And that's where we can come in as experts, or your podcast bringing up a lot of different issues can help to bring some of that experience out to the others that don't have it. So it is a time issue, but it's also an expertise issue. And I don't know why we would expect people to have expertise in something they do once or twice during their lifetime.
That's such a good point.
That's a good way to put it.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things, I guess, to pivot back to what I was saying earlier, to just maybe see if you have some additional insights on, is that our enrollment cliff and what's happening in terms of the overall demographics of our country does mean that majority now of what we say now, the new traditionals, right? The new students that are going into college now are going to be older working adults. And we're not going to have as many in terms of just the overall numbers of those straight out of college. And I think a lot of Joe was talking about my daughter, she's only 22, but it wasn't initially like she was like kind of took a little bit of time off. She wasn't really just straight to college. Like I think the Gen Xers and some of the baby boom and even the millennials, like the older millennials, I think this generation of the younger Gen Zs and even coming up now, the next generation may be a little bit more maybe workforce or maybe shorter degree programs, or really we don't know. We can't really predict 100% what's going to happen. But what we do know is we have a huge population of working adults that are in the workforce now or have been displaced that may be considering college, whereas it may not have been an option before. Like Joe said, they're home, maybe they're just trying to navigate, maybe doing a pivot to a different area in terms of the career. Is that something that you're able to, and I know you can't really predict across the board, but is that something that you've seen in terms of what you're encountering with your company as far as there are more people in the workforce that are looking now for college degrees?
Yeah, I think, I think there was a pause on that during the pandemic where, not only did companies not know where things were going, but people didn't either. Individuals
Right,
didn't either. And not
right,
only that, but everybody was adjusting to a new work environment, right? And adjusting
exactly.
to working at home. But I
Mhm.
think again, right, we're getting through that and we're getting out of that kind of paralysis. And yeah, we've seen a large influx of people that are looking to continue their educations. But I think there's another factor at play as well. Pre-pandemic, there was a segment of the population that was still skeptical about online learning. There were a lot of
Good
us that had
point.
accepted it, but there was a huge segment that was still skeptical because it's not how they went to school. It's not what they were used to. It's not when they thought back on their prior experiences, anything that they had a comfort level with. Well, we've had a huge shift in this, not just this nation, the world, right? But we've had this huge shift where all of a sudden people are much more comfortable with anything in an online environment and much more comfortable doing things more interactively over their computer screens. So I think, yeah, there's that paralysis has gone away, and yes, people are really rethinking where they want to go. But I think the segment of the population that distrusts online education has shrunk dramatically in the last 12 months.
That's so interesting because it makes a lot of sense. And I think it also runs counter to some of the media narrative of, oh, people are looking at, their kids home from college or the K through 12, kids, and they're kind of like, what is this? But I agree with you. I feel like there is a lot of upside in that most of us are jumping on Zoom several times a day for meetings. And a lot of us are working from home to an extent that we weren't before. I work from home for a large portion of my career because I worked in online learning, but I'm doing it way more than I ever did before. And I feel like the comfort level of a lot of the people on my team or people that have been used to working strictly in the office has skyrocketed with just being able to be self-sufficient from home, which I've always done. But now people are like, wow, I was kind of looking at you kind of sideways before, and now I see that it is totally possible, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the whole mindset has shifted over a short period of time. I think the other thing that has happened, so you put that in conjunction with, if you think longer term, you think back over the last decade, a decade ago, there weren't that many online programs available. There's a ton more available today. But the other shift in that has been who's providing that online curriculum. 10 years ago, it was a different, and those schools are still there, but a different set of schools. And what's happened over the last 10 years is some of your more recognizable schools, your state universities, your private colleges and universities, they've all built out robust online learning.
Mhm.
So I think, that's brought some, right or wrong, and I'm not making a judgment call here, I'm really more talking about just the public perception, that's brought some credibility to online. So you take that credibility that's built over the last 10 years because of the players that have really built it out, combine it with the impacts of the pandemic. Yeah, I think there's a growing demand in the adult learner space for these types of education opportunities.
Well, Todd, this has been enlightening, and we want to spare you more of our shenanigans here on the EdUp Experience. We're gonna,
No, more shenanigans.
well,
I
I love,
agree.
I love shenanigans, so I'm all about it. But Todd, we want to ask our final two questions that we always ask every guest. Number one, what did we miss about Clear Degree? Anything that you want to say about your organization? Anything you have going on? It's actually pretty awesome service. So anything you want to add? And number two, what do you think the future of higher education is going to look like?
Yeah, so to number one, I think I would probably just reiterate that it's really personalized, it's individualized. I think the most important point that we didn't hit is we never take a dime from a school to recommend a program. That's what allows us to be completely unbiased and completely transparent, is we're never paid by the school to recommend their programs.
Yeah, that's pretty huge, right? So you can always just present the product and let the consumer choose. That's huge. And what do you think the future of higher ed is going to look like?
I think the future of higher ed is going to be really interesting from a couple of different perspectives. One perspective is right now, or I shouldn't say right now, let's go pre-pandemic. There was a huge value placed on the campus experience, particularly among the matriculating high school students. I kind of wonder, is that value still going to be there in the future? If you think about the class of students we have now that are that age, sure, they thought they were getting a campus experience, but for the last year they haven't, right? Because most of their classes have been online. And so I'm really curious to see over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, how much value is still placed on that campus experience versus just the education itself. So I think that's going to be a interesting watch as we go forward.
Now, there's something that'll cook your bacon, Liz, to think about what the future is going to look like.
Yeah.
It's we got to one of these days when I have the time or take a vacation, I'm going to go in and go back to every single guest and take what they said the future of higher ed is going to look like, and I'm going to put it in like a little compilation.
I love that idea.
That'd be pretty interesting to listen to, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I don't have the time to do any of that, so we'll see.
Do that over the weekend. Have that on my desk on Monday.
Okay, sounds good, boss. Thank you, Todd, for joining us today. This has been amazing, and thank you. I encourage everybody to check out Clear Degree. What's your website, Todd?
It's cleardegree.com.
Everybody should check it out. It's a really well done site. And, if you think about it from the consumer perspective, it could be something that could really, really help organizations offer a great benefit to employees. Todd, thank you for being with us. You are the co-founder of Clear Degree, and we are so happy that you joined us on the EdUp Experience today.
Thank you for having me.
Hey everybody, we hope you enjoyed that episode of the EdUp Experience. To learn more about the EdUp Experience, please visit our website at www.edupexperience.com and subscribe to our email list. Please share this podcast, head over to Apple, and please give us a rating and review. We appreciate your feedback. And of course, subscribe to the EdUp Experience so you're notified when our episodes drop. Here at the EdUp Experience, our goal is to make education your business. Thanks for listening.